Obviously, what you want as a tabletop RPG designer or GM, ultimately, is to come up with a few good solid components to make a coherent adventure. Sadly, even the best adventure generator you find online, or PDF or book you buy, can provide you with elements or the skeleton of a framework, but the content itself, the specifics, and the coherence often do not lend themselves to combinations. You got to put a little work into it. There are good creative designers and GMs that can work with about anything and make awesome adventures with the strangest ingredients, but that type of genius may not come that easy to the rest of us, me especially. But I do want to discuss and hopefully give an example of how this type of thing can be done. It is possible, but it isn't magic. It does take effort and some rather unintuitive conclusions and leaps of deduction in some cases to make a plot. Among other things, I've created a random plot element generator, for lack of a better term, uncreatively titled 22,000 count word generator, which you can find here. And it was originally just for myself. It's available for anybody to use, of course, but I just wanted to see if it would give me what I was wanting, and it does okay. Well, again, as this video is about, it just depends on how much work you can put into it and how well you can interpret it. Now, first off, I created this primarily for inspiration, so in its most basic form, it just spits out random things, adjectives, nouns, whatever, in no particular order or relation. From there, I tried to refine it a bit and built one option to give some structure, a person or thing, an action or verb, an event or other thing, to sort of artificially give some hierarchy of usefulness to the random words. Then I decided to make both viable, so when you generate info with it, it may give you one style or the other. And overall, this is a variable use. You can get crap no matter what, or some may be compelling. Both are set up in the form of acts and scenes, with a few scenes per act as per the standard narrative story or plot structure. Ideally, the elements of each would make sense and tie into the others, but as it is, these designations of Scene 2 and 3 and Act 2 are really just suggestions. You may only use the scenes in one act and write a whole adventure with it, or you can make a mega adventure and use everything it gives you, if you were lucky enough to get everything to kind of work out where it fit together. But let's just start with our first page I get, and we'll see what works and what doesn't, and what we can do with what works. Here is the first of the results that my generator gives us. The act's outline is Act 1, person, place, subject, event. So that's the components it's going to have. In each line, it's going to give us a person or an occupation. It'll give us a place. It'll give us a subject, and then it'll give us an event. So in this example, Scene 1, button burnisher, which is the person, barber, that's another person, flood, sudden death, and then optionally, in parentheses, siege engineer and lounge. Scene 2 is witch, ballroom, unity, leprosy. Optional elements are rain and measure. Scene 3, barrel filler, tombstone cutter, hawk, H-O-C, family fireworks bring the police to the door, family doctor charged with failing to help accident victim, and wrapped. Scene 4, great old one, ladies' clothes, cluster, being unattractive, optionally visions of another self and net maker. So let's look at all these. The first one doesn't have much going on for it at first glance. It looks passable. It's for an opening scene, but it's not particularly interesting or compelling. Still, a barber, a flood, sudden death, a button burnisher, not sure if we're going to keep that, and optionally a siege engineer introduced into the scene. So barber, flood, sudden death, button burnisher, siege engineer. You have to basically see these things individually, these elements individually and relationally, big picture style at the same time, to come up with a believable scene. Not all things will be workable, and some will just need to be trashed and you move on. But let's try this one. button burnisher, barber, flood, sudden death, siege engineer, and lounge. So there's a flood. We can pick that out along with sudden death as the most important and dramatic elements here. They could be background elements that, that you might find out or something that happened to somebody in the past. But for now, it would be a shame to waste such exciting action-oriented terms, so let's make them be what the scene is about. So someone is killed suddenly by a flood. Makes sense. If that's the case, might this take place outside? Maybe, probably. If we're going for fantasy, it's much more likely. A barber and a siege engineer. Again, let's just ditch the button burnisher here. We've got enough useful terms. It doesn't seem to add enough to try to be something that we need to put any effort into. The lounge, let's interpret that as a verb and not a noun. So a guy, a siege engineer, normally, but maybe there's no war going on, so he's like a civil engineer now in civilian life. He's working in his job repairing a dam or something. No, that seems... How about let's have him actually be crazy or hired by a villain, so he knows all about demolition besides construction, so he blows up a dam near town. Luckily, the water sluices through, but most of the town withstands it, but the barber, lounging around inside his business due to really no traffic, nobody's needing their haircut, or blood drawn, or whatever, and he's caught unawares. The flood of the water crashes into his premises, pins him under a heavy desk, and he drowns. So there's the sudden death and the flood. This uses most of our terms and sets up an action scene. We can have the player characters involved here or not. It's possible if they're there, maybe they can save him, or they'll find his body, or there's a lot of options. But we'll just say this is what happens. We'll decide all that later. Right now, we're just setting up the scene. It's possible this will be a background or an instigating event for the PCs to find rather than experience. We'll see. Moving on, though, as you might notice, we're going to start with the next one, and we're still in Act 1. We're taking these scenes, and it says scenes, and there's 4 scenes per act, but this is optional. And I err on the side of providing too many elements or ideas rather than too few. We may be able to just get done with just the scenes for this first act and decide we have a whole adventure. That's fine. That's up to you. Alright, let's move on to scene 2 here. Witch, ballroom, unity, leprosy. There's where leprosy comes in. And then optionally rain and measure. Okay, this is immediately interesting. A witch in a ballroom and leprosy. Okay. Already some strong elements. Optional elements are rain and measure. These two combined lend themselves to the idea of record rainfall, obviously. Okay, so this makes me think it could be tied to the flood that we already established earlier. So that's pretty handy. You don't always get things to work out like that, but sometimes you do, so that's great. Let's use it. Maybe the siege engineer was working on the dam after all, and he's not a villain. Maybe the rain was so heavy lately that people have been worried about just what happened. Just what happened. The dam bursting, and maybe he was warning people, or he had gone by himself and was like, I need to reinforce the dam. Of course, he could still be a villain. Maybe he was hired by somebody later on in this adventure, and he could be a henchman that broke the dam as part of a way to punctuate whatever other nefarious activities will go on. We'll see. How does the witch, the ballroom, and leprosy fit in, though? And unity? Unity of what? Of the town? I can imagine the town would be united in the idea of not drowning. We'll go with that for now. So it seems appropriately dramatic, if this is for a fantasy setting, for the evil witch, we'll make this witch evil, might as well, to show up during an expensive royal ball, to threaten and demand and proclaim her hatred for something or other. You know, the typical villain stuff. So this witch teleports in, or the doors of the palace slam open, and there she is, referencing the amount of rain, saying, oh, look at this, the constant rainfall, and it's just going to keep going. She threatens it won't stop anytime soon. Perhaps a guard rushes to try to subdue her, and she strikes him with a horrible spell, and he falls back, blisters erupting all over, parts of his skin beginning to melt and deteriorate and slough off. Doing this, we spend, for lack of a better term, our leprosy element. So he's like, now it's taken care of. There's the leprosy. She's struck him with a leprosy spell, which is horrible. And it establishes her as a very incredibly dangerous enemy. Okay, now back to the unity. Maybe the witch doesn't like some unity that exists, and that can be her demand. If your kingdom allies itself with King Gobthorn, I will wash your pitiful land completely off the face of the earth. So unity is actually what's threatened here. But why does she not want that to happen? What caused it? What threat does that pose to her? Or what resentment is she harboring related to this? Maybe scene 3 will help us out? So let's go on to scene 3, which is barrel filler, tombstone cutter, Hawk, H-O-C, family fireworks bring the police to the door, family doctor charged with failing to help accident victim and wrapped. That's barrel filler, tombstone cutter, Hawk. Let me see what that is. Okay, Hawk is to this place. It's Latin. For this, or hither. So we can use this as either here, in this place, or possibly hurry. Also, it can be used for because of or so. From this we can establish this scene indicates a consequence of some kind. Something that happens as a result of taking or not taking a course of action. If we want to forego the idea of here for Hawk, let's use the because. So we'll try to combine that with family fireworks bring the police. That's an interesting element by itself, and it can be easily implemented here. Perhaps the witch demanded in the previous scene the king's daughter, the princess, is to be killed or married off to a commoner or a rival king or something to prevent her from to prevent any possibility of an alliance in the future that the witch is against, perhaps. The parents may be refused, or one of the parents will say the king, say the mother. Let's say it's a stepmother. Let's say it's the evil stepmother. Let's just go the whole fantasy trope. It's an evil stepmother, but a good king. Or it could be a bad king, but he could still love his daughter. And the guards are called to keep order and see to it that the daughter is somehow removed from the situation as per the witch's orders to meet her demands, so everybody will be safe. So maybe the king is like, no, I don't want my daughter anything done to her. But the evil stepmother's like, well, you heard him, you heard the witch, so what can we do? We're all going to die. So she wants to go ahead, and this is where we add in the Hawk's because of this or so clause. So perhaps the PCs, because of this decision that's being made, that the king can't really argue against because it's gonna kill everybody. So even though he's against it, he still may have to rule as king to give up his daughter, because if not, the witch is just going to kill everybody. And the stepmother, she's actually for it. Maybe she's in cahoots with the witch. We don't know. But here, this is where we can have the because. The PCs may be asked by the king secretly for help. He may say, listen, I'm the king. I have to make this decision, but I want my daughter safe. What can you do? Or maybe he'll even have a plan. He doesn't want his daughter sent off or killed or whatever. Well, the evil stepmother maybe is pushing this as the only option. So how does the tombstone cutter and the barrel filler fit in? Well, both are containers which someone can fit inside. Perhaps the girl can be smuggled away in a barrel, or the tombstone cutter, he could fake a tombstone for her, or let's see, what else? So she can be put in a barrel and thrown in the ocean to presumably drown, but it's rigged and she can escape and live, maybe. Or perhaps the PCs can use barrels, maybe hiding in them to, I don't know, infiltrate the sewers or something. Or use them in some other way. You could put explosives in them, or I don't know. But we'll just say that those are elements that can be used and could figure in prominently to this scene. Or to another scene but be planned here. The cutting itself from the tombstone cutter doesn't seem like it would be terribly useful offhand, but having heavy things like tombstones could be useful in a plan, so let's leave it open for maybe he can provide something or be a resource for the PCs. Maybe they want to put a tombstone of a certain weight that would be the same as the girl's in a barrel, so anybody that's carrying a closed barrel will assume it's her, but it's not. It's kind of nebulous right now, but you can see where that could happen. You could go a lot of different ways with that. The family doctor charged with failing to help an accident victim element. That's pretty specific. But this isn't really an accident, getting rid of the daughter. But we can instead make this part of the plan. The PCs might be able to get away with the doctor taking the blame for the girl's presumed death when she's put into a barrel. Maybe they decided that's how to kill her, that she would be sealed up in a barrel or drowned in a barrel of wine or something and sealed in and died. And then he'll take the heat because he should be a good doctor that wouldn't do that, but he can play the cowardly doctor that just, I was only following orders, I hated to do it, but they were going to kill me. And so he can take the heat and the hate for the death of an innocent, but it was actually in service to keep her alive because he's signing off on her death warrant even though she's not dead. He was in on the whole plan, and it just looks like he killed her. Wrapped. Well, that simply means motionless and distracted or something along those lines. If we can figure out how to fit that in, great. If not, it's not a big loss. We have enough elements for this scene, and like button burnisher, it doesn't really add much. It's not a very powerful word in itself. Definitely not with the combination of what we have here. And now our last scene, scene 4, if we want 4 scenes. Literally, there's usually three acts and 2 or 3 scenes. You can go with 4. It just depends on who you ask. But if we interpreted this as 3 or 4 sections, these 4 scenes that we've done, or acts in themselves, and we felt like this was enough material and content for the PCs to have to do with what's already we've gone over, we could just make this previous scene the last one. Say, if the girl gets out somehow, that's the end of the adventure. The PCs have saved her. It would be short, probably, given what we know of it. But it's possible. It could be a quick adventure, just that the girl got saved. You could add in a fight with the witch just to close things up, or even leave it hanging. The girl departs, the witch departs, fooled into thinking the daughter is gone and no alliance will happen. Maybe she'll be an issue later whenever, the daughter comes back, or the king decides to do an alliance or something. This could be a drop-in adventure rather than a full standalone. It's part of something else. It just depends on what we want to do with this. But let's go for this last scene because it's got a ton of stuff. The bad part is it almost suggests an entirely different adventure. But maybe we can do something with it. Scene 4 is Great Old One, Ladies' Clothes, Cluster, Being Unattractive, and optionally Visions of Another Self and Netmaker. So if we took it by itself, as its own plot, this is about a trap, a deceptive ruse or ploy to get by a great old one, in Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos, a cosmic, a deity that's just usually malevolent, whose motivations are just beyond normal human understanding. And for some reason, he likes to lay traps, capitalizing on the vanity and self-consciousness of humans. We'll say this one, we'll just make one up, sometimes called the Great Weaver or the Cosmic Fisherman. He created a net that takes on the form and has the illusion of an exquisite dress, and places it in the path of a desperate woman who is often ridiculed or excluded for her plainness or her self-critical ugliness. She thinks she's never good enough. She's, dowdy and maybe ugly, and she dreams of being beautiful, of people really, really admiring her and her looks. So she puts on the garment and looks radiant, both to herself and to others. But it slowly, at first, begins to taint her. Her mind gets a little dull. She starts thinking a little odd. She'll become deluded, basically. The illusion begins shedding. It stops being such a beautiful dress and starts looking a lot more worn, but she won't know this. She'll eventually transform into some horrible creature, not knowing it's happening. Slowly her mind dulls and she becomes a grotesque horror dressed in tatters. Now where does cluster fit in as an element for this? Or the vision of another self? Well, the vision, obviously, the victim would think that that's the beautiful version of themselves. The vision of another self is their idealized self, their goals of what they want to be. So that's simple and fits right in. The fair princess or the radiant young lady, it's obvious. The cluster? Well, it could be a cluster of clothing. We could interpret it that way. So rather than one dress, perhaps this great old one leaves a trunk or a wardrobe, an actual physical cabinet that provides all kinds of wonderful garments. Like an infinite wardrobe. Just she can pull out whatever, and it's some beautiful thing, perfect for whatever occasion. But they'll all still have that same corrupting influence. Or perhaps people that fall victim to this curse gather together eventually once they've lost their minds and become these mutants into a pack of horrible, slavering, scrabbling monsters that were once people. You could implement cluster there also. But can we fit this into our existing adventure? Well, we could have the princess herself fall into this trap. Perhaps in a later adventure, maybe she finds what looks like a dress fit for a princess, and perhaps dreams of reclaiming her throne once the witch is dead, or maybe there's a rebellion going on, and she's decided she needs to look the part once she's put back on the throne. Maybe her parents have died, and so she'll need a dress, and this one's perfect. Or perhaps this is what happened to the witch herself. Maybe she fell into this trap. She was given powers, but made ugly and malign. Sort of a variation on what we'd already said about her turning into a monster. And she blames the king or another kingdom, the other king she doesn't want the alliance with, and wants to make sure that none of them profit or have any sort of benefit. But maybe she can't act too boldly, or they'll just hunt her down. Maybe she's not that powerful a witch. Or maybe it's all a ruse and she's actually jealous of the princess. And she's just cunning enough to make this all happen as a way to get rid of the princess. Her other demands about not allying with the other kingdom are just a smokescreen. Now that would be really clever. It would be a lot of work, but if you're deluded enough, maybe. And so we see that we've used only the elements from the first 4 scenes within what is listed in Act 1 of the results set out from this generator. But it can potentially provide all the basic information needed for an entire adventure, possibly even 2. That's without going on to the next set of results, Act 2, and its 4 scenes. In fact, it's likely, if somehow you manage to get lucky enough, that you can tie all the results from all the scenes and all the acts together and merge them into one single scenario. And admittedly, the cohesion seen here in this example that we've done is not all that common. How much extra effort you put into it and supplying names and NPCs and all that sort of thing, you could have a very large adventure that could span multiple sessions. You could get a dozen sessions out of if you were able to use everything that the generator gave you on one page. It's unlikely that you will get something that you can use like that where everything will fit together, but it's possible. As you can see, these types of generators can be great for inspiration, ideas, but don't necessarily provide any level of completeness for adventures. The GM or designer still needs to nurture it along with creativity and judgment. And I admit I don't have a really good interpretation for how this last scene fits in with the other 3. It's nonetheless a good example of how one can come up with coherent ideas, at least per scene, and a lot of the ways that we've done here, how the scenes fit together. This last one is debatable, and that's one of the things that you'll run into with generators and lists for inspiration is how do you fit everything together? Does it fit together? Is it usable? I mean, you may decide this last scene is great as a plot, but maybe better as a horror scenario. So you'll take it, set it aside, save it, and write something for it. Maybe you'll do another generator for it and to come up with other ideas that are more fitting, and just drop that from this one. It's up to you. But you need to nurture it, and as I said, it's dependent on your creativity and how well you can interpret from some pretty disparate elements to bring things together into one clear adventure that makes sense to you and to the players while they're playing for their characters. So, tell me what you thought of this. What would you have done differently? How do you think the last scene fits into the others, or does it? Post your own thoughts in the comment section, and please like and share this video and subscribe if you're so inclined. And tell me if you want to see more things like this. Thanks.